I was sitting in my corner office at our Austin tech startup, staring at a text message that made my hands shake. After 8 years of complete silence, my mother had finally reached out. The notification glowed on my phone screen, like a beacon of hope I thought I'd never see again. For a moment, my heart raced with the possibility that, maybe, just maybe, she wanted to rebuild what we'd lost all those years ago. But what I read in that message changed everything I thought I knew about family loyalty. Before I tell you what happened next, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you have ever felt forgotten by the people who were supposed to love you most. And make sure to subscribe because this story gets darker before it gets better. The message was short and cold. No greeting, no apology for the years of silence. Just 5 words that transported me back to my worst childhood memories. It said we needed to talk about Amanda, my younger sister. I had not heard her name spoken by our mother in nearly a decade. I need to take you back to where this all started, when I was 12 years old and my world fell apart. My parents were going through what could only be described as a nuclear divorce. Not the kind where people disagree about custody schedules or who gets the good china. This was the type where lawyers got rich and children got forgotten in the crossfire. My father had been having an affair with his secretary, and my mother discovered it in the most brutal way possible when she found them together in our family home. The shouting matches that followed were so intense that neighbors called the police twice. During those hellish 6 months of legal battles, something became crystal clear. My parents were fighting over Amanda, who was 8 at the time, but nobody was fighting for me. I watched from the sidelines as they argued about who would get my little sister, who would pay for her dance classes, who would take her to doctor appointments. Meanwhile, I might as well have been invisible. The custody agreement was finalized on a rainy Tuesday in October. Amanda would live with Mom in the nice suburban house, along with her new stepfather, David, who owned a successful insurance agency. And me, I was shipped off to live with my maternal grandmother in her tiny trailer on the outskirts of Dallas. I will never forget that last night in our family home. Mom was carefully packing Amanda's favorite stuffed animals and pretty dresses into matching pink suitcases. She folded each item with such care, such attention to detail. When I asked if she was going to help me pack my things, she barely looked up from Amanda's clothes and said I could figure it out myself. That night, I stuffed my belongings into garbage bags and cardboard boxes, knowing that I was truly on my own. Grandma Martha was 72 years old when I moved in with her. She lived in a single wide trailer in a park where half the residents were retired and the other half were people like us, the ones life had knocked down hard. Her fixed income from Social Security barely covered her own expenses, let alone supporting a growing teenage boy. The trailer had 2 small bedrooms, 1 bathroom that barely worked, and a kitchen so tiny that 2 people could not stand in it at the same time. My bedroom was actually a converted storage space that used to hold Christmas decorations and old photo albums. Those years from 12 to 18 were the hardest of my life. We ate ramen noodles and generic mac and cheese most nights. My school clothes came from thrift stores and church donation drives. I attended a public school in an area where teachers had given up trying, and students cared more about surviving than learning. I got picked on constantly for my secondhand clothes, and the fact that my grandmother dropped me off in her rusty 1990 Ford Escort that backfired every time she started it. But the worst part was watching Amanda during her rare visits. She would show up twice a year at Christmas and during summer break wearing designer clothes and talking about her dance recitals, her private tutoring sessions, and the family vacations to Disney World and the beach. She lived in a 4-bedroom house with a swimming pool, had her own computer, and never seemed to lack for anything. Meanwhile, Grandma Martha worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. During the day, she cleaned office buildings downtown, and at night, she sold candy and snacks to students at the local high school football games. During those lonely nights in that cramped trailer, I taught myself to code using library computers and old programming books I found at garage sales. It was my escape from the reality that my own family had essentially discarded me like yesterday's newspaper. When I turned 18, Grandma Martha suffered a massive stroke while cleaning an office building at 2 in the morning. She died 3 days later in the hospital holding my hand while machines beeped around us. I called my mother to tell her the news, and her response was delivered in the same tone someone might use to acknowledge a weather report. She said she was sorry for my loss, as if Martha had been a distant acquaintance rather than the woman who raised me when she could not be bothered to. Nobody came to the funeral. I sat alone in the front row of a mostly empty chapel, listening to a preacher who had never met Grandma Martha read generic words about eternal rest. After the service, I discovered that her medical bills had consumed what little savings she had. I sold the trailer to pay off the remaining debt and found myself homeless for exactly 27 days, sleeping in my beat-up Honda Civic in Walmart parking lots and showering at a local gym. That experience taught me something crucial about survival. When you have absolutely nothing and nobody, you discover what you are really made of. I was not going to let this define me. I was not going to become another statistic, another kid who fell through the cracks. I applied for every scholarship, every grant, every program that would help me get into college. I wrote essays about overcoming adversity until my fingers were numb. And somehow, miraculously, I earned a partial scholarship to the University of Texas. College was not easy, but it was better than living in my car. I worked 3 jobs to cover what the scholarship did not pay for. I washed dishes at a campus restaurant from 6 to 10 every morning, delivered pizzas 3 nights a week, and took freelance coding projects that kept me up until 3 in the morning. My roommate Kyle came from old money and thought my work schedule was some kind of performance art. He would order $50 sushi dinners while I ate 99-cent ramen, and he genuinely could not understand why I did not just ask my parents for money like he did, but all that hustle paid off. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science and immediately landed an internship at a small but growing startup called TechFlow Solutions. The company specialized in logistics optimization for e-commerce businesses, and I quickly realized that their current system was incredibly inefficient. I spent 3 weeks of my own time developing an algorithm that could reduce shipping costs by 30% while improving delivery times. Sarah Johnson, the CEO, was a brilliant woman in her mid-40s who had built the company from nothing after her previous startup failed. She recognized talent when she saw it and offered me a full-time position before my internship even ended. In my first year, I went from junior developer making $45,000 to senior developer earning $65,000. By my 3rd year, I was team lead, making $85,000, and by my 5th year, I had reached $130,000 annually, with equity options that were actually worth something. But here is the thing about growing up with nothing. When you finally start earning real money, you do not suddenly develop expensive tastes. I continued living like a college student, renting a small studio apartment, cooking my own meals, and taking the bus to work. The difference was that now I was investing 70% of my income into index funds and cryptocurrency. I also started a side consulting business, helping small businesses automate their operations. I was not just building wealth. I was building the security I never had as a child. By the time I turned 29, my net worth had reached $850,000. I had purchased a duplex in East Austin, living in one unit while renting out the other. I was dating Jenny, an elementary school teacher who understood my background and never made me feel guilty about my frugal habits. Life was not perfect, but it was stable, peaceful, and entirely mine. That Tuesday afternoon, when Mom's message appeared, I had been reviewing quarterly reports and planning our next product launch. The simple text felt like a bomb going off in my carefully constructed world. After staring at it for 20 minutes, I finally called the number I had not dialed in 8 years. Her voice sounded exactly the same, though somehow more tired. There was no warmth, no acknowledgement of the years that had passed, no question about how I was doing. She spoke to me like I was a business associate she needed a favor from. She explained that Amanda had recently divorced her husband Marcus and lost her job at a marketing firm. She had 2 children now, Lily, who was 6, and Jake, who was 4, and she was struggling financially. Then came the punchline. Mom expected me to send Amanda $3,000 every month because it was my duty as her big brother. When I asked where this sense of family duty had been when I was sleeping in my car, she became defensive. She said that was different, that I was stronger and more capable of handling adversity. She actually used the phrase that I had always been more independent, as if abandoning a 12-year-old child was some kind of character-building exercise. The conversation lasted 45 minutes, and with each passing minute, I felt my anger building. She knew about my success because she had been monitoring my social media accounts for years. She knew about my job, my house, my girlfriend, probably even my approximate net worth. She had been watching my life unfold from a distance, waiting for the right moment to cash in. 2 days later, Amanda called directly. Her approach was different, but equally manipulative. She cried immediately upon hearing my voice, telling me about how difficult life had become. She painted a picture of herself as a victim of circumstance, struggling to feed her children while living in the basement of a friend's house. She talked about how the kids asked why they could not have nice toys like their friends, how she had to choose between buying groceries and paying for Jake's asthma medication. But then she made a mistake. In the middle of her sob story, she mentioned needing to cancel a weekend trip to New Orleans and having to return a designer purse she had just bought. When I questioned her about these expenses, she quickly tried to backtrack, claiming they were early birthday gifts from friends. The story did not add up, and my instincts told me there was much more to Amanda's situation than she was revealing. Within a week, other family members started calling. Aunt Patricia, who I had not spoken to since Grandma Martha's funeral, suddenly had my number and a lot to say about family obligations. Uncle Bob, who had never shown interest in my existence, called to lecture me about responsibility toward my sister. It became obvious that there was some kind of coordinated campaign happening, and I was the target. The breaking point came when Jenny suggested that maybe I should consider giving them a chance. She meant well, but hearing that from someone I trusted made me question everything. Was I being selfish? Had I become so focused on protecting myself that I had lost sight of basic human decency? Maybe successful people did have obligations to help family members who were struggling. 3 weeks after that first message, my mother and Amanda showed up at my office without warning. I was in the middle of a client presentation when my assistant knocked on the conference room door, looking apologetic and confused. She whispered that my family was in the lobby and demanding to see me immediately. I excused myself from the meeting, my stomach churning with dread. They had brought the children. Lily and Jake stood close to Amanda, looking confused and scared by the tension radiating from the adults around them. My mother was dressed in her best outfit, the one she probably wore to church and important occasions. Amanda wore yoga pants and an oversized sweater, but I noticed her purse was definitely not from a discount store. The scene they created in my professional environment was mortifying. Mom did not waste time with pleasantries. She spoke loudly enough for my colleagues to hear, asking how I could live in such luxury while my sister and her children suffered. She gestured around the modern office space with its glass walls and sleek furniture, as if it were evidence of my moral failings. Amanda stood behind her, tears streaming down her face while the kids clung to her legs. I managed to get them into a private conference room, but the damage was done. My coworkers had witnessed the drama, and I could see the questions in their eyes. Sarah Johnson, my CEO, gave me a concerned look and told me to take the rest of the day off to handle my family situation. That evening, they followed me home. My duplex in East Austin was modest but comfortable, with hardwood floors, updated appliances, and a small garden in the back. To them, it might as well have been a mansion. Mom walked through my living room, touching my furniture and electronics like she was appraising them for an auction. She sat down on my couch and delivered an ultimatum. She wanted me to immediately transfer $10,000 to Amanda's account as back payment for all the years I should have been helping my sister. The audacity was breathtaking. She spoke as if I had been deliberately withholding support from a sister I barely knew, conveniently forgetting that they had cut me out of their lives completely. When I pointed out that they had abandoned me, she waved it off as ancient history. According to her, I needed to focus on my current responsibilities rather than dwelling on the past. But something about Amanda's story was not adding up. That night, after they left, I decided to do some investigation. It took me less than 2 hours of internet searching to uncover the truth about my sister's financial situation. Amanda had received a trust fund of $150,000 from her stepfather David when she turned 25. Bank records I was able to access through a private investigator showed that she had burned through that money in less than 3 years. The spending pattern was shocking. Designer clothing purchases, luxury vacations to Cabo and Miami, and most damaging of all, thousands of dollars in online gambling losses. Her divorce from Marcus was not because he was abusive or neglectful. Court documents revealed that she had been having an affair with a coworker while simultaneously developing a serious gambling addiction that had drained their joint savings account. Marcus was actually a decent guy who worked as a high school teacher and paid her $1,200 a month in child support, which was more than enough to cover basic living expenses for her and the kids. The most disturbing discovery was that my mother knew all of this. Text messages between them showed Mom encouraging Amanda to reach out to me, specifically mentioning my financial success and suggesting strategies for making me feel guilty enough to open my wallet. Armed with this information, I prepared for what I knew would be the most difficult confrontation of my adult life. The next evening when they returned, expecting an answer about the money, I was ready for them. I spread the evidence across my dining room table like a prosecutor presenting a case. Bank statements, casino transaction, records Instagram photos of Amanda's expensive purchases, all dated from the past 2 years, when she claimed to be desperate and broke. I showed them the court documents from her divorce, the text messages between her and our mother, everything. Mom's reaction was exactly what I expected. She became defensive, claiming that Amanda's past mistakes were irrelevant to her current needs. She said that people deserve second chances and that successful family members have obligations to help those who are struggling. When I pointed out that Amanda was still gambling, still making poor financial decisions, still living beyond her means, Mom accused me of being vindictive and holding grudges. But it was Amanda's response that truly revealed who she had become. Instead of shame or remorse, she exploded with anger. She screamed at me that I owed them that they had given me to Grandma Martha so they could focus on building better lives. She said, I should be grateful that they were giving me the opportunity to contribute to the family now that I finally had something to offer. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Our mother did not contradict her. She did not tell Amanda that what she had said was wrong or hurtful. Instead, she nodded and said that at least now I understood my place in this family. That phrase, my place in this family, hit me like a physical blow. My place was apparently to be the emergency fund, the backup plan, the person they called when they needed money, but ignored when they did not. I looked at those 2 children, Lily and Jake, standing in my living room, while their mother and grandmother tried to extort money from their uncle. These kids deserve better than being used as emotional leverage in financial negotiations. They deserve stability, honesty, and adults who made responsible decisions. That was when everything became clear. I stood up, walked to my front door, and opened it wide. I told them to get out of my house, all of them, and never contact me again. Amanda called me selfish and cruel. Mom said I would regret this decision when I was older, and understood the importance of family. But I was already older, and I understood perfectly. The months that followed were not easy. Cutting off your family, even a toxic one, creates a wound that takes time to heal. I threw myself into therapy, working with a counselor named Dr. Patricia Williams, who specialized in family trauma and abandonment issues. She helped me understand that my mother's neglect was not about my worth as a person, but about her own inability to love unconditionally. Jenny stood by me through the entire process, never once suggesting that I should reconsider my decision. She had grown up in a loving, supportive family, and could not fathom how parents could treat their own child the way mine had treated me. Her family eventually became my chosen family, welcoming me to holiday dinners and birthday celebrations, where I learned what real family support looked like. My career continued to flourish. Sarah Johnson promoted me to Chief Technology Officer, and our startup was acquired by a larger company for $42 million. My equity stake meant that I was suddenly worth more than I had ever imagined possible. I used some of that money to establish a scholarship fund at my old high school for students from low-income families who showed promise in STEM fields. I also hired a private investigator to check on Lily and Jake periodically. Through him, I learned that Marcus had been fighting for increased custody and was providing a stable home environment when the children were with him. Amanda's gambling addiction had worsened, and she had moved back in with our mother and David. The kids were safe, but they were learning the same toxic patterns I had grown up witnessing. 1 year after our confrontation, I received a letter from Amanda. Not a text message or email, but an actual handwritten letter delivered to my office. She apologized for everything that had happened and claimed she was getting help for her gambling problem. She asked if we could start over, if I would consider being part of her children's lives. The letter was well written and seemed sincere, but I noticed it was postmarked from Las Vegas. I never responded to that letter. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Some relationships are too damaged by betrayal and manipulation to ever become healthy again. I had learned to distinguish between loneliness and genuine love, between family obligation and emotional blackmail. The most important lesson I discovered through this entire experience was that family is not determined by blood relationships or legal documents. Family is made up of people who show up consistently, who support you during difficult times without expecting anything in return, who celebrate your successes without jealousy, and who love you for who you are rather than what you can provide for them. Dr. Williams taught me that forgiveness does not require reconciliation. I forgave my mother and Amanda, not because they deserved it, but because carrying anger was poisoning my own happiness. Forgiveness for me meant accepting what had happened without letting it control my future decisions. It meant acknowledging their limitations as human beings without feeling obligated to enable their destructive behavior. Today, I am 31 years old, married to Jenny, and we are expecting our first child. We have built a life based on mutual respect, honest communication, and shared values. We talk openly about how we want to raise our children differently, how we want to create the kind of family environment that neither of us experienced growing up. Sometimes people ask me if I ever regret cutting off my biological family. The answer is complicated. I regret that my mother was incapable of being the parent I needed. I regret that Amanda never learned to take responsibility for her own choices. I regret that Lily and Jake are growing up in the same dysfunctional environment that shaped their mother. But I do not regret protecting myself from people who saw me as a resource rather than a person. The truth about family loyalty is that it must flow both ways. You cannot demand love and support from someone you have spent years ignoring or mistreating. You cannot show up in someone's life only when you need something and expect them to drop everything to help you. Real family relationships are built through consistent presence, mutual respect, and genuine care for each other's well-being. If you are dealing with family members who only contact you when they need money or favors, remember that you have the right to set boundaries. You have the right to protect your peace, your resources, and your emotional well-being. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do both for yourself and for them is to refuse to enable destructive behavior. The family. You choose the people who earn your trust through their actions rather than demanding it through guilt. Those are the relationships that will sustain you through life's challenges. Blood may be thicker than water, but loyalty built on love and respect is stronger than both. What would you do? If family members who abandoned you suddenly returned, asking for financial support, have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-protection? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming difficult relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away from people who do not value your worth.